I am thrilled to be here today as a visitor to the unceded lands of the Gadigal and Bedigal people in Sydney. I'd like to invite you to reflect and pay respect to the First Nation custodians that occupied the land we stand on today. My name is Fonti, and I never thought I'd be a data scientist. My story began when my family immigrated to New Zealand when I was a toddler. And when I started school, my mum found all these other immigrant mums, and they formed this community, so to speak, and this chosen family. And the mums would run regular classes in Chinese, English, math, and art. And in hindsight, I think these experiences from a young age really created a really nurturing and safe space to learn, and all the subjects they taught didn't feel very particularly gendered, so to speak. Fast forward to high school, and at the time I was really interested in the arts. I was studying photography and taking 2 languages. I think I wanted to be a translator or humanitarian journalist or something. But I had this one particular chemistry teacher who I'm very grateful for. She was so patient with all her students and would stay back behind to help students through titrations or anything that they didn't understand. And it was the same chemistry teacher who encouraged me to apply to go to Geek Camp, which was this forum that across all of New Zealand where students came together, and they created really safe space for all of the nerds to come out of their shell and explore all these different STEM subjects before they went to university, so they feel more equipped in choosing the subjects that they wanted to pursue. So I attended Geek Camp and I absolutely loved it. While I didn't find my calling there, I was more excited to pursue some STEM subjects. So off I went to undergrad, and my strategy was to take really broad subjects from maths, statistics, to feminist studies, to English and biology and statistics. And that was my introduction to R programming, as well as I also took biology. That's important. And it wasn't until my second year in an ecology class where a lecturer was telling me about the complex mating behaviors of all these different animals. For example, the albatross here, they form these complex pair bonds for life, whereas house sparrows, they cohabit with a partner, but they actually have multiple mating partners throughout the reproductive season. I was blown away. It was something that had caught on fire or something. And so when I finished undergrad, I talked to my favorite lecturer at the time, and I said, if I wanted to pursue a career or research in behavioral ecology, what do I do? And so this mentor said to me, he said, well, my advice to you is to work with nice people. And there's a bunch of them at Macquarie University who also studies animal behavior. So in the end, I went to Macquarie University and I decided to work with Professor Martin Whiting and his postdoc at the time, Dr. Daniel Noble. And it was my first time working in this lab environment, and it was incredibly supportive. Everyone came to aid when you needed. I was particularly nervous in giving talks, and I feel like I owe it to them now, being able to talk to an audience quite comfortably. And some highlights was, so I studied the male aggression behavior of these eastern water skinks and the implications of their social dominance on their ability to learn. And some highlights was presenting at an international conference hosted in Cairns and having a local newspaper pick up my research. I thought that was really exciting. I was able to also present to a more informal setting through the Pint of Science Festival, where I was able to communicate to the public about my work. And the great thing was I felt really lucky to work with an advisor who was also interested in R and programming and statistics. So I felt like I was able to develop my interests in both in coding and programming, as well as biology. So by the end of my master's, I knew I wanted to pursue a PhD, but I didn't really know in what. So taking my advice from my brother, who said to try everything until you figure out what you like and don't like, I continued to work with Dan Noble, who introduced me to Professor Shinichi Nakagawa at UNSW, where I did my PhD. I studied the impacts of thermal environments on the development and physiology of these delicate skinks here. As you can see, this one's just hatching from its egg. And I felt really grateful to have worked with really experienced advisors that helped me design a PhD that exposed me to a lot of research skills. And some highlights during my PhD included attending an evidence synthesis hackathon, participating in the Women's in Science March in response to the Trump administration, and being on a live podcast for Sydney Science Festival. So by the time I finished my PhD, half of our country was on fire. And my vague plan was to do a postdoc overseas, but going overseas at the time didn't feel possible because the whole world was on lockdown. So very luckily, this unique opportunity came on my radar, which was to work with researchers in building R packages. And it felt like for once I could really pivot to another interest of mine that was kind of always in the background, which was programming and R and data science. And while I didn't tick all the boxes in the position description, the manager at the time, Dr Fonti, who's also a professor at UNSW, he encouraged me to apply and just try learn what I can in preparation for the application. And so I got the role, and in this role, I felt like I really had to trust my ability to problem solve and trust all those transferable skills and to learn on the job. And I was able to work with a very diverse group of scientists in biology. And while I wasn't doing science per se, or the actual research, I felt like I was enabling it, and it was really made me feel really fulfilled. And a highlight from this period of my life was probably working with a bunch of botanists and creating the Austrates R package, which is an interface to the Australian plant database. And this piece of software was recognized by the Australian Research Data Commons, and I received their new software developer award, which was really exciting. So then one day, someone reached out someone from my past when we worked at the hackathon reached out for the job opportunity, and this was Martin Whiting. He's at the Atlas of Living Australia. And if you don't know what the Atlas of Living Australia is, it's like Google Maps, but for Australian biodiversity. So if you want to know where all the koalas are, this is the place you would go. Specifically, my role was to work with Invertebrates Australia, which is a nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of Australian invertebrates. And we together developed data cleaning and analysis pipelines to aid bushfire assessments. So this kind of calls to home when, at the end of my PhD, the fires were happening. So when that project came to a close, I had to figure out what I wanted to do next. So I took a leap of faith and placed a bet on myself, and I wrote a grant with Daniel Folster back at UNSW to continue the work I was doing and to expand my support to across the Faculty of Science and to create shiny apps. So my goal was to make research methods and software more accessible beyond people that can code, but for people that doesn't know how to code. And I invited a bunch of women to collaborate on the grant, and it's been really incredibly so amazing to work with other people, especially women in astrophysics through to psychology. So one highlight from this current gig so far is to present at a US data science conference. There was some imposter syndrome for sure, because I was like, why would they want to hear from a biologist? But there I was doing my thing, and it was still interesting and appealing to data scientists. So in my free time, I also work at the Invertebrates Australia now, the nonprofit I mentioned, as their analytics manager. This role has been really good for my growth, because it kind of pushes me just outside of my comfort zone. And interestingly, this organization was founded by some very passionate women in invertebrate research. And together we've been trying to just figure out and wear corporate hats and figure out what to do to work towards our mission of conserving Australian invertebrates. So at the moment, we're working on an analysis pipeline to determine where are the hotspots in Australia so we can prioritize our conservation efforts. So that's my journey so far, and I know I'm kind of at time, so I want to quickly end the talk on a few remarks on what of our wins as women in science and more women in STEM more generally. I feel like we've been incredibly great at celebrating and showcasing diversity, for example, this event. And that's kind of gained traction in public awareness because, I mean, have we all seen the Barbie movie? And this has resulted in increased support for women in terms of funding opportunities and skill-based programs. But what I want to see more is probably systemic change that kind of addresses the wife drought, which is a term coined by Annabelle Crabb in her book about the shortages and struggles that women face while juggling both professional and domestic responsibilities. And a lot of the inequities that women face is comes down to unequal distribution of these domestic responsibility between men and women. So more in practical terms, perhaps equal paternity leave or subsidized childcare or hard help and mental health support for women can really help offset some of that wife drought, so more women can be able to be hired in more executive roles to continue driving inclusive changes. And so with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and the Australian Data Science Network, and especially Tim for organising this event. It's been really inspiring and really lovely to hear everyone's stories. Thank you.